There were secrets hidden beneath the flawless glow of the Azure Cove Resort. Between million-dollar suites, candlelit dinners, and private parties by the infinity pool, a silent story was about to be revealed, a story that would unite a billionaire accustomed to power and a waitress who hid her own life behind a uniform. That night, while the resort seemed to sleep, Marcus Ellington would open a door and find something no empire could ever buy. Azure Cove Resort was a seaside temple of luxury, where guests enjoyed nights wrapped in French champagne, exclusive parties lit by torches, and quiet mornings on private balconies overlooking the ocean. The hallways carried the scent of expensive perfume, and every detail seemed calculated to project perfection. But behind this glittering facade, life moved at a very different rhythm: hurried footsteps, long shifts, discreet orders that never ceased. Among those workers was Ivy Callahan, a waitress who balanced trays with a practiced smile, while hiding beneath her gray uniform a life far removed from the splendor she served each day. The resort seemed to breathe differently after midnight. The voices of the guests had faded, leaving only the distant echo of waves against the reefs and the lazy rustle of palm trees. Between the glowing lobby and the service corridors, silence became absolute, broken only by the creak of cleaning carts and the steady hum of the air conditioning. Marcus Ellington walked alone through those hallways. At 42, owner of a hotel empire that stretched from Manhattan to private islands in the Pacific, he was the kind of man who never relied solely on reports. He liked to see with his own eyes. That was why, whenever he appeared at one of his resorts unannounced, he dismissed directors, avoided prior notice, and walked the corridors alone. He believed truth revealed itself in the dark hours, when the spotlights were off. His stride was firm but discreet. There were no guards at his side, no secretaries to announce his presence. Only him, the faint smell of polish on freshly cleaned floors, and the metallic reflections of the service doors. To any employee crossing paths with him, Marcus would look like just another well-dressed guest. And he preferred it that way. Yet that night, something disrupted the calculated normalcy. As he passed through the storage wing, he noticed a thin line of light spilling from beneath the door marked Supplies, Linen Room. The glow was faint, but impossible to ignore. The billionaire stopped, watching in silence. That room was supposed to have been locked hours earlier. No employee had any reason to be inside at that time. He checked his watch, 12:43 a.m. A subtle tension ran through his body. Experience had taught him that small details often hid major flaws, and flaws, in his business, were costly. A light left on in a forbidden place could mean negligence, misconduct, or something worse. The hallway was empty, the air cool and heavy with expectation. Marcus advanced slowly, his leather shoes sliding almost soundlessly across the waxed floor. With every step, the line of light seemed sharper, calling his attention like both an invitation and a warning. He stopped before the door. Rested his hand on the cold handle, but didn't turn it yet. He stood still, listening. The steady drone of the air conditioning. The occasional pop of pipes. And then a muffled noise inside. So brief it might have been imagination. Marcus drew a deep breath. He was about to open it. On the other side of that door, he knew, he would find the truth. Silence itself seemed to hold its breath with him. Just one twist of the handle, and the billionaire would see what no one else knew existed in the heart of the resort. What do you think the billionaire is about to find behind the door? Write your guess in the comments, in just one word. The door opened slowly, revealing the interior of the storage room. The space was narrow, lined with shelves stacked with piles of white towels, uniforms sealed in plastic, and boxes stacked to the ceiling. But what caught Marcus Ellington's attention wasn't the meticulous order of the stockroom. It was the figure on the floor. There, under the yellow glow of a small makeshift lamp, was a young woman. She wore the gray uniform of the resort's restaurant, her apron draped across folded legs. Her head rested against a small backpack, like an improvised pillow. Beside her lay carefully folded clothes, an open notebook, and atop it, a heavy, worn camera, an object far too precious for someone in her position. Marcus remained still for a moment, his gaze fixed. His first thought was direct, automatic, cold, a waitress sleeping on the job. Nothing irritated an empire owner more than negligence in the middle of work. His resorts were synonymous with perfection, every detail mattered. A scene like that, if discovered by guests, would be unforgivable. But when he took another step, the billionaire noticed something that made him hesitate. The young woman wasn't resting in peaceful sleep, her body seemed defeated by exhaustion. The deep circles under her eyes betrayed sleepless nights, her posture that of someone who hadn't given in willingly, but had been forced to by necessity. This wasn't carelessness. This was fatigue. Marcus didn't speak immediately. He moved closer in silence, and as he did, he noticed more signs: the almost ritual care with which her clothes were folded, the discreetly tucked away toothbrush case, the camera positioned as if it were a precious possession to be guarded. This wasn't simply someone resting where they shouldn't. This had layers. Her breathing was light, almost imperceptible. He leaned in slightly, without any intention of touching her, only to look closer. At that instant, a metallic glint from his watch caught the lens of the camera. The flash of light stirred her awake. She opened her eyes with a start, like someone always ready to defend herself. Seeing the tall man in an expensive blazer before her, she straightened immediately, her body rigid, her breath quickened. I'm so sorry, sir. She stammered, her voice trembling but quick, almost rehearsed. It's not what it looks like. I wasn't. I just. She tried to stand at once, but in her haste, the notebook fell open to the floor. Sketches scattered across the ground, outlines of anonymous faces, silhouettes of the resort, graphite lines of the sea. I know it looks wrong, she continued, panicked. I was off duty, I finished my shift early. I just needed a few minutes. I didn't want to bother anyone. I swear I did all my tasks. Marcus didn't answer right away. His usual coldness was etched on his face. His dark eyes shifted from the drawings to the backpack, from the backpack to the camera, and back to her face. What's your name? He asked at last, his voice low, devoid of emotion. She drew in a breath, as though preparing for a sentence. Ivy Callahan. He nodded slowly. Position? Waitress. I work at the Reefside Grill, night shift. Silence. The weight of her answer lingered in the air like an accusation. The billionaire, owner of the resort, studied the employee who should have been at home or in staff housing but was here instead, in a storage room, surrounded by personal belongings. Sleeping on the job? He asked, this time with harshness. No. The waitress raised her hands, almost in defense. I had already finished my part. The tables were clean, the area was organized. I just needed to rest for a few minutes. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Her tone wasn't insolent, but desperate. Still, rules were rules. Employees didn't sleep in storage rooms. They didn't turn work areas into private refuges. He found himself torn. One part of him, cold and practical, told him this was a clear infraction. One call to the duty manager and it would be solved in minutes. But another part, the part that had made him stop before judging too quickly, made him hesitate. Ivy's eyes weren't those of someone caught in laziness. They were the eyes of someone cornered. How long did you plan on staying here? He asked, his voice neutral. Just a few minutes, I swear. She lowered her gaze, biting her lip. I know I shouldn't be here. But I didn't have a choice. The phrase hung in the air. I didn't have a choice. Marcus didn't react, but his mind began to turn. What exactly did she mean by that? Was it just an excuse, or was there more? He didn't ask. Not yet. He preferred to observe. The young waitress hurried to gather the scattered sheets from the notebook, but her hands trembled. Marcus noticed a curious detail. Despite her nervousness, the pages were filled with firm, careful strokes. They weren't idle doodles. They were the records of someone attentive. But he didn't comment. He simply watched as she stuffed everything back into her backpack. "Sir, I beg you." Her voice faltered for a moment. "Please don't tell my supervisor. I need this job. I do my work, I've never missed a shift, I always put in my hours. I promise it won't happen again." Marcus drew a deep breath, his expression unreadable. The dilemma stood before him: to summarily fire a waitress who had broken clear rules, or to investigate what lay behind that unusual scene. He was not a man of impulsive decisions. But he was also not someone who tolerated breaches. "Stand up," he ordered at last. Ivy obeyed quickly, her eyes still wide with fear. The camera swung in her hand, almost as if it were an extension of herself. Marcus studied her in silence for several seconds that felt far too long. Then, with a firm gesture, he pointed to the door. "Come with me." She swallowed hard, clutching her backpack tightly against her chest. She didn't dare ask where they were going. She simply followed the billionaire, feeling the weight of every step echo through the silent hallway. His face revealed nothing. No anger, no compassion. Only coldness and control. But inside, Marcus Ellington already knew this night would not end like all the others. Ivy thought the humiliation was already complete. What she didn't know was that the true revelation was still to come, and that a single confession could change everything. The hallway was silent, save for the sound of Marcus's firm footsteps and Ivy's hurried ones, almost stumbling behind him. The young woman kept her backpack pressed against her chest, as if the gesture were her last line of defense. The billionaire hadn't said where they were going, and that made her even more nervous. They reached a smaller room, reserved for internal meetings. Marcus opened the door and motioned for Ivy to step inside. The space was simple, but carried the coldness of a corporate setting: a light wooden table, chairs aligned, a projection screen folded against the wall. Ivy hesitated before crossing the threshold, but obeyed. "Sit." His voice was not a request. She sat on the edge of the chair, her posture straight, as though even her body language might spare her from punishment. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, trying to avoid Marcus's penetrating gaze. He leaned against the table, arms crossed. "Now, explain." Ivy drew a long breath. Words didn't come at once. When she finally spoke, they sounded more like a confession than an excuse. "I live here." Marcus arched his brows. "Here? Inside the resort?" She nodded slowly, her cheeks flushing with shame. "In the storage room, sometimes in the staff lounge when it's empty. Never in the main areas. Always hidden." For a few seconds, he just looked at her. The silence weighed heavier than any accusation. "Do you realize what this means?" he asked at last. "I do." Her voice faltered, but she didn't retreat. "I know it's wrong. But I had no choice." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "There's always a choice." "Not this time." She lifted her gaze briefly, and in it there was a flicker of determination mingled with fear. "When I came here a year ago, I rented a small room in town. But prices skyrocketed. Almost everything went to rent, leaving nearly nothing for food. I tried. Sharing with colleagues, I tried finding another place, but I couldn't." The words spilled out quickly, as if she feared being cut off at any moment. "I had to keep working. And if I went back to my hometown," she paused, her lips trembling. "There's nothing for me there." Marcus kept his expression composed, but he absorbed every detail. It wasn't the first time he'd heard stories of employees struggling with rising costs, but never had someone hidden inside his property. "And why didn't you ask for help?" he pressed, his voice low, steady. Ivy lowered her eyes. "Who would believe me? I'm just a waitress." Silence reclaimed the room. Marcus realized that, even faced with risk, she didn't cry. The fear was there, yes, but mixed with a strange dignity. He leaned slightly forward, his gaze fixed on the backpack she still held. "And that camera?" Ivy took a deep breath. This time, she answered with less hesitation. "It's all I have left of my father. He taught me how to take pictures when I was a child." She unzipped her backpack and quickly showed him the notebook he had seen back in the storage room. The pages were filled with notes, lighting diagrams, names of photographers, observations about composition and angles. Among them were magazine clippings and carefully printed black and white photographs, artistic in their detail. "I want to be a photographer," she confessed, lowering her voice. "I want to travel, to capture stories, people, places. I want others to see what I see through the lens." There was passion in every word, even though they were spoken in a near whisper. Marcus discreetly flipped through a few pages and realized they weren't idle dreams. They were serious, dedicated studies. "So that's why you stay here," he concluded, closing the notebook. "You work nights, hide during the day, and live among towels and boxes just to keep your job." Ivy nodded silently. Marcus walked to the window and stood there for a few seconds, gazing at the ocean outside. His mind weighed the alternatives. Allowing her to remain hidden was unthinkable, exposing her to management would mean immediate dismissal, but simply ignoring what he had just heard seemed impossible. "You know I could fire you right now, don't you?" he said without turning. Ivy's heart stopped for a moment. "I know. And you know what you did is serious." "I know." Her voice nearly broke. "But I can't lose this job." Marcus turned to face her. There was no arrogance in his tone, only fact. "And what guarantees me that if I give you another chance, you won't repeat the same mistake?" She drew in a breath, lifting her gaze with effort. "Nothing. I have nothing to offer except the promise that I'll keep working hard." For a moment, time seemed suspended. Marcus studied her with a clinical eye, as if trying to decipher whether the person before him was merely a desperate young woman, or someone carrying something greater within. Ivy, in turn, held her breath, feeling as though every word spoken could decide her fate. "So that's it." He slowly stepped closer, placing his hands on the table. "Your secret is that you live hidden inside my resort, risking the reputation of my brand, just to keep a waitress job." The way he said the word secret made her body tremble. She closed her eyes for a moment, unable to deny it. "Yes." The silence that followed was more threatening than shouting. Marcus Ellington was a man known for quick decisions, but in that moment, he deliberately let the weight of suspense linger over her. Ivy hugged the backpack to her chest, terrified that at any second he might call security. Instead, Marcus straightened and said simply, "I haven't decided what I'm going to do with you yet." And he left the room, leaving her alone, her heart burning with uncertainty. But what Ivy didn't know was that this silent man carried a name that would change the weight of every word spoken. And when the truth came out, there would be no turning back. The room remained silent. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only audible sound as Ivy sat, clutching her backpack tightly against her chest. Every second without an answer stretched longer, as if it were part of an invisible trial. Marcus paced slowly around the table, observing her like someone calculating a complex equation. His face was unreadable, neither anger nor pity, only control. "Tell me about your work." The question sounded unexpected, almost casual. Ivy blinked, confused. My work?" "Yes. What exactly do you do here? What's your routine?" She drew in a breath, adjusting herself on the chair. "I work at the Reefside Grill. Mostly the night shift. I serve tables, take orders, carry trays. Sometimes I stay late to help with cleaning when we're short-staffed." Marcus tilted his head, attentive. "And do you enjoy it?" There was a pause. Ivy could have given a practical answer, but something in her tone shifted. "It's not what I dreamed of." She tightened her grip on the backpack. But I try to do it well. Every guest deserves to be served with care. I think that's what turns an ordinary meal into a good experience, when someone notices the details. The quick gleam in her eyes didn't go unnoticed. It was pride, even in the midst of exhaustion. And how do you endure it? Marcus pressed. Dark circles, exhaustion, hiding in storage rooms, why not simply leave? Ivy lifted her chin despite her vulnerability. Because I don't give up easily. Her voice came out firm, almost defiant. Maybe I have nothing, but the little I earn is through hard work. And I wasn't going to throw that away. Marcus stopped in front of her, analyzing every word. It wasn't insolence, it was conviction. A trait that, in other times, he himself would have admired in young executives who stood out. He walked to the head of the table, placing his hands on its surface. The silence stretched before he released the sentence that would change everything. Do you know who you're talking to, Miss Callahan? Ivy's heart raced. The way he pronounced those words, the firmness in his tone, sounded like the prelude to disaster. She hesitated, swallowing hard. Are you some kind of manager? Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. Not exactly. He straightened, his gaze locked firmly on her. I am Marcus Ellington. Owner of this resort. Owner of this entire chain. The words fell on Ivy like a sentence. The blood seemed to drain from her face. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Marcus watched her reaction with cold detachment. The shock, the fear, the sudden realization that he wasn't just an ordinary boss, but the man who held absolute power over her future in that place. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. I didn't know. Well, now you do. The silence that followed was deafening. Ivy lowered her head, unable to hold his gaze. Her quickened breathing betrayed her panic. If before she had feared being fired by a mere manager, she now understood she was facing the one man who could decide not only her dismissal, but whether she would be banned from ever working in any of his resorts again. Mr. Ellington, her voice came out almost as a whisper. It wasn't my intention. I never meant any disrespect. I just needed to survive. Marcus remained still, his mind in conflict. The part of him shaped by years of business shouted, rules are rules. She broke trust. She cannot stay. But there was another part, quieter, that recalled the careful way she had folded her clothes, the dedication reflected in her sketches, the genuine passion when she spoke of photography. Do you understand the size of the problem you've created? He asked, trying to keep the tone of an implacable CEO. Employees hiding in storerooms, sleeping in resort facilities. If a guest finds out, it stains my brand. I know, she answered, her voice trembling. I know, and I take all the blame. A long pause followed. Marcus studied her as though weighing an invisible scale. On one side, protocol, the flawless image of his brand. On the other, raw life, the reality Ivy embodied with all her fragility. He exhaled deeply. For the first time, his voice sounded less cutting. Why does it seem to me that you're not just working to survive, but fighting for something greater? Ivy raised her gaze, surprised by the question. Her eyes, tearful yet steady, met his. Because it's true. The job pays the bills. But my dream is to photograph the world. I want to show what people don't see. I want to give light to what goes unnoticed. The contrast between the waitress's simplicity and the magnitude of her ambition made her appear even more vulnerable. Marcus turned his gaze away for a moment. There was the conflict. If he followed the rules, he would have to fire her immediately. But something within him resisted the idea of crushing such a pure dream with the blind force of corporate discipline. He ran a hand over his jaw, pensive. You put me in a difficult position, Ivy Callahan. She shrank back, her voice faltering. I know, and if you have to fire me, I understand. The words were spoken with resignation, but also with courage. There were no more pleas. Only the bitter acceptance of fate. Marcus watched her in silence, feeling a strange pang of discomfort. He wasn't used to hesitating. His decisions were normally swift, absolute. But now, something within him wavered. At last, he stepped away from the table, moving toward the door. Before leaving, he cast one final phrase, heavy with tension. "I haven't decided what to do with you yet." The door closed behind him, leaving Ivy alone in the cold of the room. Her heart pounded unevenly, her mind repeating the same question, is this the end? Or the beginning of something I can't yet foresee? She believed the humiliation was already complete. What she didn't know was that, instead of a final fall, she would receive the most unexpected proposal of her life. The night advanced over the resort. Outside, the sea returned the moonlight in silver bands, and the wind carried the sound of waves crashing against the rocks. Inside the meeting room, Ivy remained motionless, as if she didn't dare even breathe. The revelation that the man before her was Marcus Ellington, the resort's owner, still echoed like a sentence impossible to erase. She was waiting for only one word, fired. But when the door opened again and Marcus returned, something in his expression seemed different. There was no anger, no haste. There was reflection, as though every step he had taken outside had been a silent battle. He stopped in front of her. "Stand up." Ivy obeyed immediately, her heart racing. Marcus studied the young woman for a few seconds before delivering a phrase that shattered her expectations. "You will no longer sleep in storage rooms." Her eyes lifted, confused. "Sir, from now on, you'll have a room. Simple, in the staff wing. It's not luxurious, but it's dignified." His tone was firm, leaving no room for objection. "You'll have a real bed, and you won't need to hide among towels and boxes." Ivy blinked several times, as if she hadn't understood. "A room?" Marcus nodded. "Consider it in order." She swallowed hard, unable to believe it. "But I thought that I would fire you?" He interrupted, arching an eyebrow. "I admit, that was my first reaction. It would have been the easiest path, the most logical one." "Then why didn't you?" The question escaped before she could contain it. Marcus leaned closer, placing his hands on the table. "Because I don't see laziness in you, Ivy. I see fight. And that is rare." The words hung in the air, as though they didn't belong to the same man known for his ruthless decisions. He leaned back slightly, his tone shifting. "Besides, I believe you can offer more than just perfectly balanced trays in a dining hall." Her heart tightened. "I don't understand." Marcus gestured toward her backpack, where the camera rested. "You have talent. I saw your notes. You're diligent, passionate. You notice details others ignore. And details are the soul of my business." "You're saying that?" "I'm proposing that, in addition to your work at the restaurant, you also collaborate with our marketing team." He spoke with conviction, as though the decision had been made long before he announced it. "I want you to use your photography to capture the resort, the events, the experiences we offer. Perhaps you'll see things my current professionals overlook." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Ivy pressed her hands against her backpack, incredulous. "Me? Work in marketing?" Marcus nodded. "Yes." She shook her head, almost laughing nervously. "This can't be real. I'm just a waitress." "Don't underestimate yourself, Miss Callahan." His tone was firm, but without arrogance. "Ordinary people often see with the greatest clarity. You've trained your eye not in elite schools, but through the necessity of observing the world closely. That's worth gold." The disbelief on Ivy's face was evident. "Why would you do this for me?" Marcus paused for a long moment. For an instant, It seemed as though he searched for the answer within himself. Maybe because you remind me of something I've forgotten, that people are more than rules written in manuals. The words surprised him as much as they did her. Marcus Ellington was not a man of confessions. But, looking at Ivy tense, and yet standing with dignity, he realized this decision was more than generosity. It was an unsettling mirror of himself. Ivy drew a deep breath, trying to take it all in. I don't know what to say. Just say you'll accept. She hesitated, but her tearful eyes betrayed the mix of fear and hope. I accept. A brief silence followed. For the first time since they had met, a thread of understanding seemed to form between them. Marcus straightened his jacket and turned to the door. A room will be prepared for you today. And tomorrow morning, I want you to report to the marketing department. They'll speak with you about your first projects. Ivy only nodded, almost voiceless. When he was about to leave, her courage made her whisper one last phrase. Mr. Ellington, thank you. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He only gave her a brief, intense look before leaving the room. In the hallway, as he walked alone, his mind filled with uncomfortable questions. How many other employees were trapped in similar situations, hiding their struggles out of fear of the rules? How many times had he chosen numbers and protocols over people? The image of Ivy, clutching her camera with her wounded dignity, wouldn't leave his mind. For the first time in a long while, Marcus Ellington found himself questioning his own style of leadership. Without knowing it, that decision would transform not only Ivy's life, but also the future of the entire Ellington empire. Weeks had passed since the night Ivy Callahan was discovered in the resort's storage room. Time, which once felt heavy and uncertain for her, now moved differently. The young woman still wore her gray uniform and served tables at the Reefside Grill, but there was something new in her demeanor, the awareness that each step she took, however small, was already leaving its mark beyond the dining hall. Between shifts, Ivy found time to collaborate with the marketing team. At first, her insecurity was immense. She had no academic training, no mastery of advanced software or corporate strategy. But she had something that couldn't be taught, a sharp eye, the ability to see beauty in overlooked details. The first photographs she delivered surprised even the most experienced professionals. They weren't staged images or predictable angles. They were alive, the golden reflection of the sunset on the pool's water, the sincere smile of a housekeeper arranging flowers in a vase, the delicate texture of waves breaking on the sand at dawn. They were moments that needed no editing to convey truth. The team began to trust her. And Marcus, watching from afar, saw in Ivy's progress something greater than talent. He saw proof that people, when given dignity and space, can truly flourish. That was how an unexpected idea arose. In a meeting with his executives, Marcus announced the creation of an internal program, Ellington Assistance, dedicated to employees in vulnerable situations. The program would provide temporary housing, scholarships, and professional support. No employee should ever have to choose between surviving and working, he said, to the astonishment of the board. We are stronger when we see those who go unnoticed. He didn't mention Ivy by name, but everyone knew where the inspiration had come from. Not long after, the storage room where she had once hidden was completely renovated. The shelves and boxes gave way to a wide room, with drawing tables, bookshelves, and computers. On the walls, framed works by employees, photographs, poems, small design projects. It was the Ellington Creative Room, a space for employees to study, practice, or simply develop their personal talents. Marcus visited the site at the inauguration, and for an instant his eyes met Ivy's. She said nothing, but her discreet, grateful smile was enough to confirm that this gesture carried more weight than any signed contract. Ivy, for her part, was living a silent transformation. She still endured exhausting days, balancing trays and cameras, but now her fatigue was accompanied by purpose. She was discovering that dreams don't have to be abandoned when reality feels harsh. Sometimes, it only takes a spark of opportunity to reignite the flame. One night, as she left the restaurant, she passed by the former storage room. The door was open, revealing the new space lit and alive, with young employees scribbling in notebooks and typing on laptops. For a moment, she remembered herself curled up on the floor, guarding her camera like a treasure. She felt a pang in her chest, but it wasn't pain, it was hope. Marcus had changed as well. He, who had always prided himself on his unshakable discipline, was beginning to see flaws in his old way of leading. Rules and numbers may keep an empire standing, but it is people who give it life. And often, the most valuable people are those no one bothers to notice. During a dinner with investors, when praised for yet another international expansion, Marcus responded with something that left everyone in silence. True growth is not only about building more resorts, but about building people. It was the first time anyone had heard the magnate speak of business in such human terms. Ivy kept working, but she was no longer invisible. Her photos began to illustrate the resort's campaigns, attracting attention on social media and praised for capturing the soul of the place. Some guests even asked who the artist behind the images was. She still wasn't traveling the world as she dreamed. But each click was a step, each published photo a reminder that even in the most unlikely circumstances, dreams can take root. Their cycle was complete, Marcus, learning that true leadership is seeing the invisible, Ivy, proving that even a waitress can transform her reality when she has the courage to believe in herself. That late afternoon, walking along the beach with her camera slung over her shoulder, Ivy smiled at the horizon. The sun was sinking into the sea as if painting a canvas just for her to capture. And in that instant, she understood something she would never forget. Sometimes, true luxury is not in gold, but in the courage to believe in yourself. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments and write believe to remember that believing in yourself is the first step toward any transformation. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like.